So Simon Sinek told us about that energy of the wave created by people who are early adopters of thinking about different movements. So let's speak to an early adopter in this movement who's in government with the power to change things. Really pleased to now welcome to the stage Minister of Communications and Information Technology, His Excellency Abdullah Amer Al-Swaha. Greetings. How are you? Welcome.
I'm glad to be here, and it's fantastic news that I heard earlier this morning, and I have to kick off by congratulating Amin and his amazing team. 60,000 views from 60 countries on your inception and debut event. Amazing job.
Your Excellency, the kingdom is transforming, and your ministry is playing such a key role in building the digital economy here. Tell me where you are in that.
Thank you, Eddie. So I always like to start on the positive note. This is how I'm hardwired. So I think when you talk about digitalization, undoubtedly it's the largest social equalizer and economic multiplier. We have seen it firsthand when it came to the pandemic. It was the only way for our loved ones to continue their education. Mind you, close to 500 million kids could not continue their education because of lack of remote education, whether because of access or affordability. And it was the only way for us to combat COVID-19. Look at how we monitored the R0. Look at Tawakkalna and how we were remarkable in making sure that we're second best in class globally in how we handled the pandemic with technology. Look at the vaccine. And right now, I have the pleasure of working closely with the brightest innovators locally and regionally and globally, how we pushed the needle to come within 18 months to a vaccine. Those are classical examples of how digital, if used for good in a human-centric fashion and in an ethical way, can make the difference. But we have to talk about the other side. And the other side, I think we have to go back to the basics. If you look at the World Economic Forum definition of digital transformation, it talks about using digital, physical, and bio for disrupting business models. And I think we were too focused on digital, and we have forgotten about the physical and the bio. If you talk to the World Health Organization about the definition of health, they talk about the complete state of mental, physical, and psychological well-being. We have to introduce the digital component.
How does that fit into the global, how does what Saudi Arabia is doing fit into the global acceleration of digital adoption across all aspects of the business value chain?
Oh, trust me, we're doubling down on digital big time. And now, because of this amazing platform, we get to talk about some of the brutal facts. We were very proud that we drove consensus during the G20 presidency with the leadership of the Crown Prince, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, to drive consensus on the ethical use of data and AI. And let me talk a little bit about that.
Please.
I mean, when we talk about health, psychological wellness boils down in the digital context to three things: autonomy, competency, and relatedness. Let's talk about autonomy. We live in a world today, if there is unethical use of AI, you're talking about fake autonomy. Let's define autonomy. It's the ability for you to have the freedom and the willingness to make your own decisions. But today, unethical use of AI might pivot you when you do a search, a Google search, to make sure that the next keyword that pops up is a word that primes thinking or certain biases within your mindset. Think about how videos today are being watched by our kids and the next generations. Think about the correlation between bullying and making sure that we have a safe cyberspace for our kids in using this digital context. Let's talk about competency. Today, there's a lot of fear and discussion about machine overtaking men and women in the workplace. Let's make sure that we tackle these questions about the preparedness and the readiness of the workforce to make sure that as we talk about the next generation leaders, it's not only about IQ, intelligent quotient, it's about emotional quotient, it's about social quotient, it's about digital quotient. It's about making sure that the next generation really understands that it's about emotional and social and digital more than just IQ. And the data doesn't lie. When we went into lockdowns globally, and I'm not only talking about Saudi, reports are emerging where right now we have kids in school that have social withdrawal, and we have to double down on emotional intelligence and social intelligence activities. And how can digital complement these activities and nudge those behaviors rather than take them to other behaviors? Last but not least, relatedness. Digital should be the glue that brings us all together, should not be the distraction that takes us away from the physical and bio world, and digital should be the agent of change.
Let's look from your perspective, Your Excellency, the Ministry of Communications and Information. How does this digital well-being factor really fit into your thinking as you consider the path forward?
Let me talk individually first, and I'll share with you what we're thinking about as policymakers. So individually, more recently, I've realized that we are in the midst of something called the Great Resignation. And if you talk and listen to all of the reports, there's what they call the Zoom fatigue. There's a lot of people confused between the integration of work, life, play, and learn within every aspect of our living. And this is why we have to go back to the essence of how digital and tech should be there to complement and to enhance our quality of life rather than to substitute it or distract from it. So personally, I decided recently to go back to exercise. So I've decided, instead of checking my wearables for notifications to make sure that I check social media or the latest on LinkedIn, I made sure that it reminds me it's the next time to hop on a bicycle. And not only that, the moment I conclude, I take a photo and I share it with the community and make sure we create a movement back again for exercise and how we can go back on delivering Vision 2030 metrics on exercise. Within the work context, we have realized that digital is good for collaboration, for making sure that we spoke to global leaders within an instance to make sure that we fix the next big thing for our societies, economies, and so forth, and collaborate within an interconnected world. We also realized that digital can help us make sure that we manage the physical world more better. So we've decided to make sure that we lock down team building activities and more interactions. I mean, currently I manage a big ecosystem between digital, space, and innovation, spread it among more than 5 entities. Without digital, I couldn't have collaborated just 15 minutes ago to make sure that I approve the next big thing for space or for innovation. Let's talk about right now organizationally. And I think we spoke about the G20 efforts that the Kingdom have led in developing and adopting the OECD principles for data and AI, how it's robust, ethical for human purpose. And as a result of the amazing job that we have seen today with ISRA and Aramco, we're actually collaborating as a whole of nation. I believe the nations that will emerge are nations that are going to work in a whole of nation fashion, where you cannot distinguish between governments, private sector, and entrepreneurs, but they're going to coexist and collaborate and cooperate appropriately to make sure that as we look at legislation, as policies, in a programmatic fashion, to nudge, to go back to the true definition of digital transformation, where it's about bio, physical, and digital in a disruptive manner, where we look at healthcare in the true definition of physical, mental, and psychological, and digital well-being. And if I could wrap up, and this is an advice to the aspiring leaders, and I'm still an aspiring leader, I genuinely believe we also need to look at leadership well-being. I believe a lot of the leadership principles that sometimes we're too attached to might be fit for purpose for the 20th century, where it was about assembly lines and it was about carrots and sticks. And my plea to myself, to remind myself as a leader, and to all of the leaders, established leaders and aspiring leaders in the room, let's remind ourselves that legacy leadership is about telling the next generation what to think. Today's leadership is about teaching them how to think. Tomorrow's leadership is about helping them how to rethink.
Really powerful. Thank you, Your Excellency. And finally, this is such an important issue because it concerns all of us every day, almost every moment of every day. You mentioned your phone as or your watch is one of the ways that you can use as a technique to improve your digital well-being. What are some of the other techniques that you personally could share that increase your own digital well-being?
So I have a big thing on atomic habits and how we could nudge behaviors. So one of the other few tips that I've personally have done, and I'll share with you organizationally, is 2 stories. One is personally, I'm a big fan of watching whether it's Shahid or Netflix, and it was taking away from my exercise time. So I decided to experiment with something called temptation bundling, how you make sure that you take a behavior that you want and combine it with a behavior that you need. And actually, it has been very effective.
Has it?
And I have even implemented the same technique organizationally. I have found the best way to do silo busting is by making sure that we reduce the number of friction and interaction points for people to collaborate. So we were able to leverage digital to enhance specific cross-functional teams to deliver impact, and the results have been remarkable.
Tell me a little bit more about that. How did you do it?
So historically, we had a couple of DNAs and cultures. You had the culture of digital, which is all about agility and speed. And you had the culture of science and innovation, which is all about stamina and longevity. And we were able to make sure that we nudge certain behaviors and introduce cross-functional teams where if the nature of the project has more of a medium to long-term approach, we have the scientists lead that specific project within a cross-functional fashion, and through role modeling with the global community and locally as well when it comes to the digital and agility piece, nudge it as well. So it has been quite interesting, and I'll let you more about it as soon as we see further results.
Great. Well, I really appreciate your time today on stage. I look forward to seeing you again. I think I've seen you at the AI Summit here in the Kingdom at FII, and it's been an absolute pleasure to be with you here at Sync as well.
Let me wrap up by once again thanking Amin and Nasser, the Aramco team, and Ithra. You are making history, my friend. This is a global platform, and MCIT, and in the innovation economy and space economy, is very proud to partner with you, my good friend. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Final thought for the audience, any call to action or any thought on charting the path ahead towards building this global movement?
I believe I've mentioned the fact that we need to double down on rather telling them what to think, how to think, but rather how to rethink in this dynamic world. But again, I would like to invite the leadership and the aspiring leadership to make sure that we go to the essence of making a difference. It's no longer just about thinking about profits, but about purpose, or money, but about meaning. And then let's make sure that this next generation appreciate it's not about deep tech alone, but about deep thinking. And I'm fully confident with the amazing energy and talent and youth and women that we have here in the room, we're in good hands.
Thank you so much.